Welcome to the Community Podcast Show. If you're new here, my name is Warwick. My mission as a podcast show host is to interview industry leaders, of which today I have the opportunity of interviewing an expert in the optometry industry. This is an industry of interest to you from toddler, early ages, right through. You're going to be finding out from Casha Meintjes. Firstly, welcome to the show.
Thank you, I.
It's an absolute honor to have you here, and there's so many questions I'd love to ask you and find out about your industry. For starters, Eyetek optometrists. How did it all start? Tell us the journey of how it all started.
It actually started with my interest in optometry. My brother was diagnosed with a lazy eye when he was at school. He's 5 years younger than me. And it caused really an emotional havoc in our house. They literally told my mom my brother was about blind in his one eye. And I really wanted to know, how can an eye that looks perfect be blind? How does it work? How did it happen? Could it have been prevented? So that's really where my interest in optometry started. And then I went to study optometry. And about at the age of 23, I bought a small, brand new, not doing so well optometry practice. And I was really out there to make and do things better. Yes, that's where we started. And that was in 1993.
Almost 30 years. But that's remarkable. How's it evolved since right from when you started where you are today? The evolution of Eyetek optometrists.
I think the evolution was in a lot of ways. First of all, we started as a one-man practice, and I was still a young optometrist from university.
Did you study is there a degree in optometry?
Yes, I studied a degree of optometry at the University of Johannesburg. I realized that there is still a lot of knowledge that I wanted to get, especially with children, binocular vision, and things like that. And I think that really changed my life and my outlook when I did behavioral optometry in England. To answer the question how we evolved is we've really evolved in our knowledge, the way we practice optometry, evolved in types of equipment we used. And I think we've also evolved in being one practice initially. As the practice got bigger and there was a need, we actually expanded to different branches. So it was a very small, humble beginning, grew from there, and we're still growing today.
What makes Eyetek different from other optometrists?
A lot of things. I think number one, our optometrists are handpicked and they are picked for their passion in the industry. I do not want someone to work with me if it's a job. It needs to be a calling and you really need to want to make a difference. So all our optometrists are absolutely passionate about giving their patients the best possible care. So you need to be passionate, but you also need to have the education and the knowledge. And that we provide. I continually do courses overseas, and then I sit and I train all my optometrists so that we are really up to date with what's new according to the latest research out there. And I think the other thing, if you really want to provide excellence in eye care, to have good knowledge is an absolute must. But we can also buy the right equipment to really give us a competitive edge. You know, we work with babies. If you want to provide a specialized service, you need specialized equipment to go with that. Another thing I can say that makes Eyetek different is our appointment times, for example, is an hour long. We allow enough time with every appointment for the patient to be tested properly. It's not like it's a quick in and out. and the next one in at the door. For me, that's, I think, the big difference.
Talking everything and anything to do with eyes, and I'm hoping I give some interesting tips, but interesting facts, fun facts about our eye, and when we're smaller, and the magnificence and the extraordinary thing about eyes. I mean,
I think the basic thing that I could say is you're born with the potential to see clearly, but you might born with good vision.
so what's the difference?
So eyesight has got to do, or it's got to do with vision clarity. But if we talk about vision, it's a very complicated process of how we use our eyes and brain together to make sense of the environment. So when that baby is born, they have all the physical structures in place to develop good eye teaming, good focusing, good eye muscle skills, but they're not born with that. Those skills needs to develop, and they need to develop in a specific sequence. And a lot of people don't realize that. Some kids develop good visual skills, good ability to use their eyes together, where with others that does not quite happen. And I think one of the interesting things with vision is if we look at child development, if a child is slow to walk, slow to crawl, a mom and the family will know it. If a child is slow in the visual development, the bond will not be slower. If a child is blind, yes, that's easy. But if we look at how we use our eyes as a team and efficiency of eye muscles, that's extremely important when they go to school. It's often not identified. So a lot of people take it for granted that everyone have the same vision and the same visual skills. It doesn't happen.
Do you saying you can pick that up right back in adolescence stage? Personally thought that perhaps only later on, like studying years later on, that
I mean, like with my brother, he was 11 years old. When they picked up, he had a micro squint. That micro squint was never picked up, and that had a definite impact on his vision development. So but that should have been identified when he was still a baby, but it was never picked up. So sometimes if vision development doesn't happen in the foundational years, it can have a massive impact later. In general, when it comes to vision and visual efficiency, you want to identify difficulties as quickly as possible.
oh, so were you saying at the early age of 11, had he gone to an expert like yourself, picked it up at that early age, it would have healed it. It would have like strengthened the muscle. How? What's the significance of picking it up at an early age? These sort of challenges.
So I think with a baby, you need to pick up, is everything in place for normal visual development to occur? One of the things is that the refractive status, or the way the light focus in the one eye and the other eye, need to be the same so that the brain can put those two images together. So if the one eye is short-sighted or do not get a good focus and the other eye gets a good focus, it's going to impact that child's ability to put those two images together, and it's going to impact on their vision development. Other things is like alignment of eyes. If the eyes are not aligned, brain cannot put the two images together. So a lot of people think you either squint or you have good alignment, but there's a lot of areas in between. You can have a small squint, like in the case of my brother, where the eyes looked straight, but the eyes did not align, and the brain could not put those two images together. So what happened then is the brain tend to ignore the image from the one eye, and that development of neural connections between the eye and the brain does not develop further. So these are things that needs to be in place during or critical time of vision development. So
At what age, Kasha? I mean, like your brother was 11. I mean, it's like what age would you recommend moms or dads to?
I think that's a very good question, Warren. Vision development starts after birth. The pediatrician will have a quick basic look at a child's eyes when the baby is brought in for their checkups. But ideally, your first eye exam with an optometric pediatric optometrist should be at the age of 6 months. Wow. It feels like it's very young. And then if everything is fine and you know everything is in place for vision development to happen, should be repeated at age 2. And then after that, more frequent.
What are your personal values that drive your approach to business, patient care, your approach to what you do and how you do it?
I think that my first drive is caring for the individual. I believe vision is about trust, and the gift of vision is such an important thing. So, my drive is I really care for the individual. I don't just see them as a pair of eyeballs, I see them as a person um, that needs to function properly in the world, and how can their vision or their visual difficulty impact that. I also understand that stress and the whole holistic approach can make a difference. So for me, it's really about what's best for the individual, what's best for his specific needs. Um, I do not want to give someone a fancy lens for full day use if he's a farmer and he's outside. So I always look at the individual. And then I think the other thing is about being extremely thorough. It's not about slapdash. It's about absolute 100% perfection and accuracy. Precision. It's about precision. If a patient comes to me, I want to check everything. I don't do a quick eye test. I don't do it just quick this. I want to look at everything. I want to look at the prescription, how the prescription looks, work at eye alignment, things like that. I want to install that way of thinking for everyone that worked for me. People that work for Eyetek needs to share those same values. If they don't share those values, we do not want them on our team. So it's really about doing it 100% accurate.
Taking a quick step back in very layman's terms, when you talk or refer to vision, at a very basic level, we're talking about like an HD TV compared to a 1960 television. I mean, I know it's a simple question, but just for clarity, I mean, when you think of vision, is that what you're referring to?
I can I can do a whole day tour on vision because a lot of people confuse eyesight with vision. Eyesight is the ability to see clearly. Vision is how you use your eyes, your brain, all that vision information to make sense of the world. Vision will affect your balance. Vision will affect your ability to know where you are in space. When you read, you need vision to know where are you looking at the page. Where's that word? Where's the next word? Eyesight doesn't do that. Vision is how we use our brain, all our senses together. Vision is also about integration of visual skills, our ability to use our own muscles and find um, our focusing from near and far. So I always say you've got three aspects to vision. The one is clarity, the other one is visual skills or visual efficiency. That's got to do with eye muscle function. And then we've got vision processing, which is how we relate that vision information that we get through our eyes with all our other sensory systems. So that's in a nutshell. But vision, you can have good eyesight and you can still have a vision problem. where you can get tired, you can get lost in concentration, you can get headache, but you can see clearly. And that's where you need to make sure when you go for your eye exam, they don't just check vision. It is important, or they don't just check eyesight. Eyesight is important, but it's literally a drop of what we look at.
I hope to deep dive later into that. That sounds very fascinating. Why did you start out?
A big factor for me, Warwick, is I had a husband that believed in me. He believed that I could make a difference. He believed that we could do things better. So Eyetek is not just about me. Eyetek for me is about the absolutely phenomenal team of people we have. My husband is involved in the business, but even the optometrist, my whole team of managers is really handpicked to share my vision and my dream of how vision care should be.
And what is that vision? Where would you like to take Eyetek? On that note, next 5 years, 10 years, do you want to go global? I mean, you mentioned you were in US recently.
The difficulty is our model is very complex. It is extremely difficult to replicate our model because it's not a cookbook recipe where I just say to people, okay, we have the same shop fittings, we have the same stock, we do these tests. Everything is based on the patient's individualized difficulties. And when we go later into the specialities of Eyetek, I will elaborate a little bit more on that. But we get very, very difficult and complicated patients. I get people that are flying in from Tanzania, from the US. So if you want that level of expertise, it's very difficult to replicate that on big scale.
On that note, which I think feeds beautifully into my next question, is what are the different professions within the optometry industry?
Warwick, that's a very, very good question. And I get that asked a lot. So let me explain that although there's an overlap, there are very distinct differences between the different professionals working in eye care. The ophthalmologist or the eye specialist is the guy that studied medicine. And we work a lot with the ophthalmologists. If we pick up something that might need surgery or specific medication, we will identify the difficulty, but we refer to them. So they are specialists in the medical aspect of the eyes. So they do surgery, they do cataract surgery, they do squint surgery, they do surgery of the retina, and they prescribe eye drops. The classical optometrist is a person that is screening for eye health difficulties. If it's picked up, they refer that to the eye specialist, but then they do a refraction where they see what prescription the patient needs and they provide them with glasses and contact lenses. So we need to understand that there are many different types of optometrists. So that's your classic optometrist. So your classic optometrist will not do eye surgery and they will not prescribe prescription medication for the patient. But a behavioral optometrist
Is what you do.
is what we do. So what is a behavioral optometrist? It's also called a functional optometrist or a developmental optometrist. So we look at the eyesight, we look at eye health, but the big thing that we look at is function. We look at how the whole visual system operates. Does this patient have the visual stamina to cope with his visual demands. So the name behavior optometrist comes from we look at the behavior of the patient. If the patient walks in that room, is the patient walking in with a good posture? Or is this a low-tone patient that is dragging his feet? So we want to understand how the patient's behavior, how his difficulties is related to integration of the visual system. We look at how the eyes and the brain work together. So it's about function in much higher level that people can understand. So your behavior optometrist is very much involved in children with learning related visual difficulties, difficulties with concentration, and things like that. We provide support in terms of glasses to reduce eye strain, but also with eye exercises. So if you look at the ophthalmologist, they will only give an optical correction for clarity. That is what the academical training entails. The behavior optometrist would do the same, but we would also give glasses to support vision function, to reduce eye strain. Even if the patient can see clearly, we might give glasses for support, and we will look at eye exercises. So I can go back to my personal journey. My brother, the school nurse picked up, the one eye is about blind, he cannot see. So my mom took my brother to an eye specialist. The eye specialist at the age of 11. So the eye specialist check, is this eye healthy? This eye healthy? Yes. Both eyes are healthy. That's not the reason for the lazy eye. The reason for the lazy eye is there's a micro squint. So that means it's a small squint, the eyes could not align, and my brother's brain suppressed the one eye to avoid double vision. Okay. The ophthalmologist said the squint is so small, he's not going to operate. Okay. But he did not do anything to help with function. As a behavior optometrist, you know that if there's reduced vision in the one eye because of the brain suppressing that eye, you need to do stimulation activities with that weaker eye. And then we take it even further. We do specific vision training activities to improve the vision in that eye. We can maybe give special lenses to help and aid the eye alignment. So you see there's an overlap, but there is a difference. Just like you would get an orthopedic surgeon that would do a knee replacement, but he's not going to do the functional care after that. The behavioral optometrist is the person that provides the functional care for visual system. And then I must also add, you get your eye specialist or your ophthalmologist, and then you get your optometrist and your behavioral optometrist. But then you also get something that's called a dispensing optician. So what is that? So a dispensing optician is someone that study the specifics of glasses making, how to make lenses, the fitting of lenses. If you have a high prescription, what's the best type of lens to use with it? What's the best of frame to use it? So when
Do you mean, sorry to interrupt, Casha, are you saying, perhaps we can chat about it at another stage, but are you saying the specific frames are actually built for specific lenses?
So what we say is if you have a patient with a high prescription, for example, the lenses will be very thick. And if you then choose a bigger frame, it makes the lenses even thicker. So it's a whole field on its own. But I think, and we can go back to that, but I think what's important to know is there are people that study that. And my husband actually studied that. When our business got bigger, and we were fitting and making glasses in our practices, we realized, sure, they are difficult and complicated um, prescriptions we need to deal with. And he studied that. We have in every practice, we have qualified optical dispensers that work with our optometrists to help our patients, not just in terms of prescription, but in terms of lens choice and frame choice to make the right decision. So it's a very much specialized world out there. And I think the problem is the general public do not always understand the differences between these different professions.
So, from that vast, very detailed, thank you for sharing that. It's quite interesting. You guys specifically specialize in all of the above, or
So we're not eye specialists. So we have our staff, and I mean, I studied further also to be able to identify eye disease, but I'm not going to treat it. So we scan and pick up any eye health issues, and we work directly with the ophthalmologist. But I have certain ophthalmologists or eye specialists that now refer their children or their patients to me for eye exercises and vision therapy. So we look at the same as so we have an overlap with the ophthalmologist in terms of vision clarity. It is absolutely important for us. Eye health is important for us. We don't treat it, but we definitely test for that. But we look at vision function. We provide support in glasses for function, and we provide support in terms of eye exercises.
and I'm sure that you use all sorts of very, very fancy technology. At Eyetek, you see patients from all ages, starting from babies. How do you test a baby's eyes?
Yes, Warwick. A lot of people don't realize that you can test a baby. You need to have experience and the correct equipment. And you also need to be creative. We have different machines. We use like video retinoscopy, special tools. But what I would say the most important skill for me to test a baby is you need to be able to grab that child's attention. If the baby can look and keep looking, we can actually test a whole lot of stuff with them. And you might ask, why is it important to test a baby?
And at what age?
And at what age? Yes. So most moms think the pediatrician have a look at the baby's eyes, so that's adequate. It's not enough. We want the first eye test to be between 6 and 12 months. The reason for that is we want to check, is the prescription, the way the light focus at the back of the eye, the same in the right eye and the left eye? Because again, if the two eyes see differently, we have a risk that the brain will favor one eye and that the other eye will not develop properly, or that connection between the eye and the brain do not develop properly. So we use our equipment to get an accurate prescription. We also need to make sure that the babies can align his eyes. If we have a squint from a young age, again, we have a problem that the brain then will not use the eyes as a teen and will not develop that important neural connection between the eye and the brain. We also do health checks. We have special equipment where we look at the inside of the eye to make sure the eyes are healthy. So the short, precise answer to that question is yes, we need to make sure that everything is in place for visual development to take place. There's a critical time of vision development, And that most critical time is between the age of birth and 2 years, because that's when all these neural connections and eye teaming and focusing skills, that basis is established. After that, there's refinement from that. But that is the most critical thing when we test with pain, when we work with pain.
That's incredibly young. So my first question with regards to being that young, which is, I think for most is new because it's so young, you're worrying about diapers and other things. It's what are the benefits to a young infant child at that age of doing these incredibly like advanced tests you do? What opposed to doing it when you're 10 years old or in teenage years?
I think what's very important is we look at how the whole visual system is developing. So if we see that child for the first time, say at age 1, you get an idea, not an idea, you measure precisely what is the prescription, what is the eye alignment, but the eye is still growing. So you need to check it regularly. So the American Optometric Association very, very clearly stipulates you need to check the child at the age of 1 unless you pick up a problem or notice a problem before that. Then at age 3, because at age 1, you want to check is everything in place. If I have different prescriptions between the two eyes, then I would potentially give glasses to normalize and equalize the prescription between the two eyes. Then I want to check the baby at age 3, because now I want to check that visual development occur properly. How is the visual skills looking like? Can the child follow an object? Can the child start to focus? Can they converge? So I want to check, how does basic skills development look like? But then we want to test them again at 5. At 5, it's before they start going to school. Now we want to check, is the visual skills further developed? Is the child ready to cope with the visual demands at school? If they're not, we can do intervention. We can give them functional training, functional lenses. And then school years, they need to be checked yearly. So let me repeat myself. Ideally, when should a child be tested? Age 1. Then if nothing is wrong, again at age 3, nothing is wrong, age 5, and from there, yearly, every year through the school years.
Year 3, if something is picked up, would you be able to, with your testing and what have you, would you be able to distinguish as to perhaps which specialist that individual would go to? So in other words, if there are problems, how would you overcome them?
So, for example, if at age 3, we pick up the child have a massive squint, the angle is very big, it's affecting the cosmetic appearance of the child, then we would refer the child to an ophthalmologist that specializes in squint surgery to give this child a better cosmetic outcome. But if the child have a small squint and there's no cosmetic issue, then we might see if a prescription glasses make a difference to stabilize the squint, because there are many different types of squints, and that's a whole topic of its own. But sometimes if a child is long-sighted or far-sighted, it can create an inward turn of the glasses. So if that's the case, you can give them glasses to correct that squint. If, for example, at age 3, you pick up that the eye movements are very jerky, the child cannot track a target, he cannot pull his eyes in, then we can give them more exercises to enhance the development of those visual skills. If the child has severe allergies so it depends on the problem. But The major thing with children is you look at vision development. Are there risks that is going to impact on vision development, or there's no red flags, everything is fine, we can just monitor the child.
At a young age, well, I suppose, babies can't really read or whatever, but nonetheless, they look at their cartoons and goodies. Is there a correlation between what we, in your profession, eyesight, squint, get tired easy, something to do with that? Or is, similar?
That would be more related, I would say, with toddlers. They normally do not give Ritalin for a baby, but yes, to answer your question, there is a correlation. There's a correlation between eye strain and ADHD. A lot of kids with weak convergence are sometimes misdiagnosed as ADHD, where they just need that theory. So that's why if we can follow these kids from baby onwards and we can track their development, then we can do intervention long before that child starts school. And now all of a sudden, they pick up that the child cannot concentrate, his visual skills development is weak, and he's got a whole lot of problems.
Interesting. Kasha, how does a parent know that a preschooler has a vision problem?
Warwick, that's a good one, because number one, a preschooler is not going to complain. They're not
No.
exactly, because they think what they see and experience is the same as everyone else. So there are certain things that parents need to watch out. I would say first thing, look at behavior. Behavior of the eyes. Do they see an eye pulling in or out? Do they ever see the child squinting, blinking a lot? Do they see a red eye, a watery eye? Do they see an eyelid dropping? Do they see a whitish reflection in the eye? So appearance is important, but also they need to watch behavior of the child. If the child is slow in certain developmental milestones, so the child was very slow to start crawling, slow with gross motor or fine motor skills, it could be related to a vision difficulty. It also, if a child is not liking things that they should like, coloring in, drawing, things like that, it might be a sign that this child is experiencing eye strain and now he's avoiding certain activities. If there's a history of eye problems as well, if you haven't had your child checked up as a baby, I would definitely let them be checked out as a toddler. But say, for example, there's a history of a lazy eye, or one parent is really very much short-sighted or have astigmatism. We have to know that a lot of these eye problems are genetically inherited. Parents must be then aware that they should have their preschoolers vision checked.
So I'm sure some of these kids walking here from adolescence and young ages stressed, and are they getting injected, or like, what do you do to overcome that and the process? Could you possibly go through it? It's to what happens?
I think it is very important for the child to feel at ease with the eye test or during the eye test, because if they're nervous, it can even affect the results of the eye test. So the major thing is you need to make it fun. If that means I need to be a clown, then I do it. Because you know what, if I'm going to sit there and have the stark face and no emotions, that child is not going to warm up to me. I need to have something of interest, and I need to explain to them, we're going to play games. It's going to look like a pirate, or we're going to play a game where he's going to look like someone from out of space. And yeah,
So you mean you've got little kits and clothes, like
yeah, we've got little things, and if I wanted to look at it, so the major thing is it needs to be for fun, and you need to be able to do it on a level that's appropriate to the child. We sometimes on kids where we've made it so much fun that they're disappointed when it's over. Or they have a sibling sitting there and then they say they want to turn. If you've accomplished that, then you know you've done your job. And you don't learn that from a book. It's experience and the ability to relate.
I think that's when we learn and do the most, is when we're having fun. So I think it's lovely. That's a brilliant different twist to things. Kasha, I remember years ago in school, we did from the school nurse an art test, and everyone stood up in a long line and they kind of did the test next. Now, what is the difference between that artist to somebody like yourself and coming to an optometrist? Is there a difference, and what is it?
I think there's a big misconception that an eye screening and an eye test is the same thing. It's not. An eye screening is designed to really pick up a serious fallout with vision. And most schools today offer these screenings for kids. But a screening is done in a group. You might spend 5 or 10 minutes with a child. If we see a child in the practice, we spend an hour minimum with the child. We have the advantage that we have the mom in the room with us, so we can ask all the history of the child. We know their development, their behavior, and things like that. Also, we have our whole different range of equipment that we can use. We can keep the child's attention properly. We can also repeat tests to make sure. Because often what we do in the optometry eye test is we repeat the same test a few times and we recheck for consistency or changes in answers. The child is not a mini adult. You sometimes need to repeat a question to make sure they understood it correctly. But then also, especially with schools going children, we see visual skills is very important. So yes, they need to see clearly. We need to know how the light focus in the eye, but visual skills are important. Visual skills got to do with integration of eye muscles. Very important. If I check a child, I just don't want the child to be able to converge or look close for a second. They need to be able to do that for long periods during the day. So a big difficulty with screenings is it's very difficult to test sustainability of visual skills. So it's easy to miss a child that can see clearly and can do something quickly, but it cannot sustain that. So it's very important that parents understand the difference between a screening and a eye test.
There are many school-going kids out there that are battling, struggling with schoolwork, concentration. Is this something to do with vision?
Research have shown that 80% of learning involves vision. So if a child has difficulty with vision, it is definitely going to affect school performance. And I think 80%, that's very, very high. But that is really need to distinguish between vision and eyesight. Eyesight is the ability to see clearly. Vision has got to do with ability to see clearly, but also effort involved to see clearly. Is the visual skills that the child need to cope with the demands at school well developed so that they can sustain visual attention during the day? So we spoke a little bit before and we said the visual system develop. So what happened is if you have kids, say for example in a grade 1 class, that all might be able to read the letters, what the teacher's writing on the board, but the visual skills are developed differently. And that make it more difficult for some of the children to cope with the demands of learning and reading. And it's very important that we identify these children early, because otherwise it can lead to really reading problems and later problems with self-esteem. We even see so many kids that's been diagnosed with ADHD and they've been put on medication for that, where it might be an underlying convergence problem, the ability to pull the eyes in. So we do want to identify these kids.
What are some of the symptoms, vision issues, challenges to look out for? When you talk vision, beautifully, you went into the connection between the eye and the brain, and it's like a difference between eyesight and vision. We're talking a lot about vision now, which
How does vision potentially affect a child at school?
and the symptoms. How does one know?
So red flags
Yeah.
that we should be aware of. The moment when a child sits very close to read, it might be that they have just poor posture. But if a child has low muscle tone, that means they're getting occupational therapy to get their core straight and things like that. But the moment when they work very close all the time, they might do it because they struggle to focus or they're not focusing accurately. So I would say working very close is a red flag. Another good red flag is if a child closes one eye when he's doing reading, because he might be doing that because he's struggling to use his eyes as a cheat. So he's getting double vision. Or they are sometimes a little bit more subtle where they turn their head slightly because they use their nose as a septum. Or you might have an abnormal head posture. We sometimes get a condition where the one arm muscle is focused higher than the other one, and then the child might have a head tilt to try and keep the two together. Also, the child that blink a lot. Other things that we need to watch out for is the child that's very slow to copy from the board, because they might have difficulty to quickly shift their focus from the book to the board and back. And then they might copy incorrectly from the board, or they would be very slow. Then you have, if you look at reading itself, the child might start off okay to read, but as reading is progressing, he gets more tired, and now
Which I think is very common.
and he's making more mistakes. So he's not going to say, listen, my eyes are getting tired. He's trying, but it's difficult for me. And of course, we spoke about ADHD. So the child is not going to put up his hand and say, teacher, I need a visual break. My eyes are really sore and feel heavy. No, he's going to have ants in his back. He might be the class clown, and now he's distracting the other kids because it's difficult for him to sustain visual attention with this close-up work.
Just for fun, on that note, in your experience, child walking in, scholar, never been tested, then gets tested, gets glasses. Okay, uh, is there a way to monitor that? Can you double the amount of time you can concentrate, read? Instead of reading one chapter, they can read 5 chapters. Are there statistics like that? 'Cause
So what we do know is the statistics is that 25% of kids with reading difficulties definitely have a vision difficulty. The child was now identified with vision difficulties. Sometimes he would get glasses to support his visual function. Other times he might be enrolled in vision therapy to help him. If we look at vision therapy, it's not like they come once and the problem is sorted out. It might take 2 or 3 months to really make a difference. But how do you guide or how do you measure the difference? And I think that's where I really like to use technology. I like to use digital eye movement recordings with kids. It gives me a baseline measurement that I can see. So we use infrared technology. The child looks at targets and we can measure the speed and the accuracy of tracking the target. We also do digital reading tests where we record eye movements of the child while reading. So then when the child come back, we look at visual skills, we look at our optometric values to see the difference, to see are these values more normalized, but we can also look at the actual ability of the eyes to move. We look at the actual reading. And then I think what's very important is in terms of picking up these difficulties, it often reduce a lot of stress for these kids. So many of these kids with reading difficulties, school difficulties, suffer from anxiety. It's actually crazy. A lot of these kids come in, and I have seen kids that's only in grade 3 and they're on anti-anxiety medication because they're on anti-anxiety medication, they're on concentration medication, and those kids are just not coping with schoolwork. So often by giving them the visual support, then they're coping.
that's so interesting. You're talking about the anxiety tablets and stuff in correlation to having the correct glasses and wow, that I learned something today. They can actually help. Well, I wouldn't say stress the brain out, but it eases your mind. So I guess that's where the anxiety thing comes in. That's very interesting.
And I think what we need to also understand, if you have stress, to see clearly and to keep your eyes together, your brain have less energy to process the work. So there's a very high correlation between stress to see clearly and the ability to process. Also, if your eye movements are poor and your eyes are jumping on the text, your brain is going to get the information in the wrong sequence. So it's going to mess up your reading speed, it's going to mess up reading accuracy, and definitely comprehension. So I can also, from a personal point, relate because I had a child that had severe ADHD and sensory integration difficulties. And I understand the stress on the kids and the stress on parents. And it's sometimes heartbreaking if these kids do have a problem with visual efficiency, but the mom or told your child can see clearly, there's nothing else you can do. We spoke about how does vision affect reading and learning. But what about something like handwriting? Did you know handwriting can also be affected by vision? If you have difficulties to put your eyes together and you are straining to put your eyes on the book, it will affect your pencil grip, your ability to write comfortably on the page. Also, and this is another topic, if we look at vision, it's not just about seeing clearly, but it's also about spatial perception. It's about knowing where I am in space. It's also about when that child is writing, to know this is where the pen is, this is where the line is, and now my spatial perception guides me of where to stay on the line. So if I have difficulty with that, my writing might get uphill, downhill, coolie space. So writing is not just linked to eye muscle or to hand muscle control, but it's connected to the visual aspects of spatial orientation and placement on the book. So we can spend a whole day on how vision can actually affect the child in the chemistry.
You mentioned handwriting, which is quite interesting. And further to that, in this day and age with the digital space and computers and touchscreen, is it the same? Is there any correlation, if you will, there?
So we have a worldwide epidemic of kids that's getting more short-sighted. There's a lot of research done about that. One of the reasons for this increase in myopia is digital work.
Myopia.
Myopia, that's short-sightedness.
Okay.
Okay. So short-sightedness mean that the child can see at a short distance, but not far away. So there's definitely a genetical component. If the parents are short-sighted, then the child definitely would also have a risk to be short-sighted. But today, kids are spending hours and hours on cell phones, computers, and they're not just looking at it from this distance, but from there. So it, number one, affect vision development. So these kids don't develop proper visual skills, but also it increase myopia.
In this day and age, with all our beautiful, fancy touchscreen phones, etc., can too much screen time actually damage your vision as a child, the child's vision?
Like, absolutely. There's, I can also say to you that South Africa have one of the highest screen time usage in the world. And we see that with our children. Children need to run outside. They need to work their eye muscles to develop properly. So one of the problems with screen time is the children do not get enough exposure to develop the proper visual skills. Research have shown that kids need 2 hours of sunlight exposure a day. What's happening now is the kids are sitting at a screen, they're sitting indoors, and we have an epidemic of myopia with children. Children are getting much more short-sighted than previous generations. And it's because they don't play enough outside, they don't get enough sunlight exposure. And like I say, they're not using the eye muscles the way it should be done. So this is a big problem. I also find that even with older kids and school-going kids, because they're doing so much screen time and they're only focused at a close-up distance, the eyes don't get the opportunity to relax properly further. And a lot of these kids then develop what we call focusing spasms, where they are later then unable to relax their eyes properly because the eye muscles have been sitting for hours and hours doing close-up work. They have difficulty to relax their focus.
So, having said that, what is ultimately an ideal time per day? Or
That's a question that a lot of parents ask us. It is recommended that kids under the age of 2 no screen time. When they're 5, you can allow them an hour of screen time. And the recommended screen time for 6 to 12 years is 2 hours a day. And you would see it's substantially less than what kids are doing today.
And how would that benefit if a mum or dad out there actually did that? How would that benefit that age group dynamic specifically?
Two things: a lower risk for myopia or short-sightedness progression, and the other thing is more efficient visual skills. More efficient visual skills mean when the child actually do read, they would be able to read better and longer and with visual attention, because their visual system is not overload and stress because of all this close
When you say visual attention, does that mean concentration?
concentration. Because if the visual system is not, so too much close-up work can cause the visual system to break down. And now the child cannot efficiently focus and align the eyes the way they should be. So too much eye strain can make the visual system unflexible. That means that these kids have difficulty to use their eyes together, to relax their eyes, because we need to be able to focus at all distances all the time. We need to be able to focus hard, but relax our focus. We need to be able to converge our eyes, bring the eyes in together, but we need to look up and diverge. So it's almost like when everything is just done at a close-up distance all the time, the muscles get fatigued and they cannot be able to handle that for periods of time.
From doing a bit of research in your industry, which is very specialized, what is neuro-optometry and the significance there?
I am extremely passionate about neurooptometry. It's a subspecialty of optometry. You need to have intensive training on this field specifically. And to put it in simple terms, a lot of neurodivergent patients simply cannot have a normal standard optometric test. So we do different tests, specialized tests. That's important for these individuals. But I think the big thing is you need to always adjust the test on your patient's cognitive and sensory abilities. If we talk about, for example, kids with autism, they are very sensory sensitive. We need to be aware of that and mindful of that in the test. So neurooptometry is specifically for any individual that's neurodivergent, but also for an individual that suffered a neurological event, like a stroke or a concussion or a brain tumor. It also includes people with progressive neurological conditions like MS, Parkinson's, motor neuron disease. It's a very specialized field, and I would say it's maybe a topic that we can talk about more in at a later stage. But I think the big thing that's important is to know that neurooptometric tests are available for these individuals, and it's very important that there's an awareness.
And apparently, you one of a very few optometrists in South Africa that actually do it. Less than one handful. So it's very, very specialized. So you deal a lot with neurosurgeons and
So we deal with So the moment when we talk about neuro optometry, it's an extremely broad range. We work with children that's uh, neurodivergent, but we also then, so we get lots of referrals from special needs schools, but we also get referrals from physios, OTs, people that work with people in neuro rehab. Uh, we even have sometimes people that's still busy with in-house neuro rehab that gets referred to us, and then we work with the other professionals in the team. We work with the occupational therapists, the physiotherapists. We do get referrals from neurologists. So it's extremely interesting, the field. And I think it's a field that's not well known. A lot of patients that come to me would say, Kasha, I wish that I knew you a year ago. I've struggled for so long. So I think the big thing is we need to educate the public that these services are available and there is help for it.
Kasha, for being in your industry for so many years, is it 3 decades now?
Yes, more than 3 decades.
Well, hey, I'm sure you've come across so many interesting things and stories, perhaps, that you've seen in your career. Is there one particular story that you can share with us that's it's just kind of extraordinary and it's kind of stuck with you and you would love to hear it? Oh,
I think there's a few, and these experiences are invaluable for me. One of my experiences would be a young gentleman that I helped after a brain injury in a car accident. He was in his 20s. And when I saw him for the first time, he was in a wheelchair. Um, he, he had severe difficulty with balance and walking. And I helped him. We did a whole range of neuro rehabilitation, but I also gave him glasses to improve his posture. And the one day I was in the practice and they called me and they said, there's just someone in the front for you. And I walked to the front and this guy said, Kasha, I'm here to take you for a dance. And it was this patient. He was walking. He had a big smile on his face and he hugged me and he said to me, Kasha, you changed my life. I gave him prism glasses because could not put weight on both sides of his body. And it was just so heartwarming to see that.
how long was that transition, that period there?
It was a year. It was a year. And I would say another story that I could add maybe is I had a patient that suffered a stroke and she had double vision after the stroke, and it's extremely difficult and debilitating to see double all the time because it's confusing for the brain. And I saw her and we used prisms, and I remember in the testing room a moment when I got the exact prism measurement correct. She just kept quiet, and I had the smile on her face from ear to ear, and I knew she could see single. And I think when she collected her glasses, she was crying in reception because it was the first time she had single vision. And I think, yeah, it's extremely gratifying to be part of his journeys, and that's really what motivates me and to make a difference.